Coming up, LeBron James and the Lakers get bounced, Giannis not playing, and the Bucks could be gone soon too. Does that mean the Brooklyn Nets could have a papoose of superstars on the market this offseason to bolster their roster and change their fortunes? We break it all down coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms. And tell you, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And Doug, as we say at the top, yeah, it's the right word to use. Papoose of stars on the market this offseason, potentially, as we see these NBA playoffs continue to just knock out good teams and great players.
Yeah, well, I mean, the theme is that the older you get, the quicker you're knocked out. That seems to be something of the what's kind of running through the NBA right now, and that makes sense, right? Like, it's hard to sustain this level of superstardom for a really, really long time. Plus, it's just hard to get really far in the playoffs because it gets to be fewer and fewer teams. So it's no knock on some of these teams to be losing, and some teams have been dealt just sort of like horrible injury timing and luck too. So there's a variety of things happening here, but where the Nets are concerned, going into the summer and to some degree the summer after, is that we could be seeing more names than we probably originally thought, possibly wanting to be on the move here, right? Like there's, we for much of the season, we confined a lot of our talk to like Donovan Mitchell, right? And like that was the name. But as teams are eliminated and as like sort of big names end up hitting Cancun for the rest of the summer, it's like, well, maybe that list is longer than we originally thought. And it was kind of highlighted by the Lakers getting ousted by the Nuggets in an absolute classic in Denver on Monday night. And LeBron James does his yearly, hey, you're going to come back as a Laker next year? And he's like, we'll see. He actually just his exact quote was, I'm not going to answer that. And it's awesome.
Give a little coquettish grin to the camera.
Well, this is just what he does all the time. He does this all the time. Yeah. But it does highlight this idea that, maybe that list is longer than just Donovan. It just is. I mean, that list is just going to be Donovan Mitchell, longer than Donovan Mitchell when it's all said and done. How many actually move, we'll see. But the list of potential guys that can move is clearly going to be longer than we probably originally thought.
Yeah, it's funny too, because obviously front of mind, the Lakers, and you mentioned there, the great finish to the game. I don't know if it felt this way because it was phenomenal, but the Jamal Murray comes down the court, just gets into the lane, knocks down the jumper, second buzzer beater finish for a game winner for him in the series. Once it happened in my mind, I was like, that felt very matter of fact. Mostly as in you're down 3-1 in the series. The Denver Nuggets are the defending champs. You got all of the sense in the world that it was a matter of when, not if, they were going to knock out the Lakers. So as soon as it was done, the game was incredible. But I was like, yeah, that's right. They should win this series 4-1. They should move on relatively easy. And you're seeing that in a lot of these series. But Lakers, okay, now the Clippers seem unlikely to do it just because of their new arena and everything else, but they've got big decisions to make. James Harden's going to be a question there. We already talked about extensively now in the last few episodes, Kevin Durant and Phoenix and their whole situation. Even teams like Philadelphia, right? And what's going to happen in the East for them? The Bucks and Giannis, like you said. No, every single one of these situations is not going to result in superstar X or high-profile player Y getting moved, but it is going to open up the discussions. And all of a sudden, if you are teams that are maybe reevaluating more than you thought you would be this offseason, it just opens the door. It opens the door for a team to call and say, hey, what if we offered X? What if we thought that there's a potential for this to be the move that allows you to reset your clock? I think way more teams are going to be open to that possibility than we would have thought coming into these playoffs.
And just look at the Lakers, so because front of mind is teams that are the
Yeah.
team that's most recently eliminated is the one that's the most interesting to look at. And by the way, when they're eliminated, you can begin to have the discussion about how they're going to be different moving forward. And just look at the Lakers, right? It's like, okay, well, you have LeBron getting up there in age, but they already signaled through the Athletic, I believe it was Shams, but Shams that the Lakers would be open to like drafting Bronny James in order to keep LeBron there. It's like, okay, well, but if that's the idea, are other teams going to be open to also drafting Bronny James because he'd want to move to that team, right? So once you begin entertaining that as a talking point, it's like, well, we have this completely new idea around this. Like, this hasn't happened before, right? Someone's son's getting drafted and that's where they're going to want to play. I mean, we're just in totally uncharted territory. But then you have this part, you have LeBron coming up on a decision about whether he wants to stay in LA. And then LA, the Lakers also looking at this thing and being like, well, would we want to do a soft reset here and maybe trade Anthony Davis, right? Coming off an awesome playoffs. I mean, was clearly defensively awesome. I kind of a no-showed the fourth quarter of that game, but overall, still a very, very high level talent that, I mean, it's hilarious about the Lakers because they played the Bucks so hard for 2 years with just nothing to show for it. I think I looked it up last night. They were point differential. The Nuggets were this is not much, only plus 35 over the last 9 games in the playoffs, except they were also 8-1. So the Lakers kept it close every time until the very, very end. Long story, not short, is the reason I'm saying is because like the Lakers are at this crazy inflection point where they could tell themselves a story. It's like, man, we were so close on these guys. Maybe we just didn't have to play the Nuggets. We'd go a lot farther. But we're also have guys that are kind of older and maybe not the healthiest, and the rest of the roster stinks, and we have to make some real decisions here.
And even though they lose the series 4-1, so it does paint a very clear picture. The other part that you mentioned there is like they were leading in these games. It took until somewhere.
I'm pretty sure they led more minutes in the series than the Nuggets did. Like if you just look at aggregate lead. Say it again.
No, they led well into the third quarter of that game, and then it was 76-75, something around there, where my thought was, I was like, okay, there we go. Like, and just like that, the Denver Nuggets are now leading this game, and all of a sudden you're in that real pressure cooker down the stretch of it. But yeah, they led most of these games for a large chunk of it, and it kind of goes back to what you mentioned at the top there. Well, the older you are, the more likely it is that you'll be the player or the team that exits sooner. And that just seemed to be the cumulative effect when you talk specifically about Lakers and the Nuggets, where it's like, okay, you guys, you come out with everything you got and you're going high energy and you're a good team. You have good players, you're great players, but it's 48 minutes, not 36, right? We don't call this one midway through the third. You got to go a full 48. And it just seemed like the talent always came out the other side of it there for the Lakers. So I want to get into some of these other teams too. And I will mention, because you just brought up Anthony Davis there as well. When you see him get that shoulder bump, that seems like incidental contact, it's an incidental contact to the shoulder, but he goes down. He ends up staying in the game. But that, I think, was also a reminder for a player who actually has played over 75% of his career games, which seemed insanely high when I looked that number up. It is a reminder that Anthony Davis has been a guy that has had a lot of injury concerns. And if you're the Lakers and you've got a LeBron James thinking about retirement, and you've got an Anthony Davis who's getting older as well, you could find yourself in a really weird spot here in very quick order. So let's take a look around the landscape as well here. Mention Giannis, mention the Bucks, a lot of other teams. Plus, I have a surprising one for Doug to consider as well here. We'll get into all that coming up in just one moment.
Before that, tell you about our friends over at DoorDash. Look, we got Mother's Day right around the corner. You got to celebrate the moms in your life, all right? Whether they're in your house, whether you just moved out of their house, but you want to make sure they get a gift Mother's Day. There's so many different things you can send these days. You can surprise her with flowers from the brand she loves. Yeah, you can get into the tech stuff too. It's all there. And it's going to come the very same day with our friends over at DoorDash. Look, moms are a gift. You got to give her the best this coming Mother's Day. Get gifts as thoughtful as she is with DoorDash. You can select from hundreds of expertly crafted bouquets, the best of the tech and self-care essentials. Best of all, is delivered right to her door. Maybe she got a sweet tooth. Maybe she's a tech enthusiast. Maybe it's the beauty is her game. Or maybe she's a little outdoorsy. DoorDash has you covered on all fronts. Get all of your Mother's Day gifts all in one place and get 50% off your next order, up to $15 when you spend $15 plus on your next flour, convenience, grocery, or retail order now with code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA. Order using DoorDash today. Terms apply. Also want to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL. FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers on FanDuel are going to get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Can't beat that, baby. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, so much more. They got the live betting as well. It's all there for you at our friends over at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, talking a little NBA playoffs, talking about superstars being on the market. Can I ask? I wanted to ask this question. LeBron James, he said it's always his postseason interview. Well, we'll see what happens. Talked a lot about his kids. He got one in college, one going pros. Got his daughter in high school. All this stuff, and I rarely think about. I'm not saying this in an insulting way. I rarely take LeBron James at face value with a lot of these comments, but it did seem pretty quick, and it did seem very quick and honest. Like he was like, "Yeah, I got a lot going on, the kids and blah blah blah." So maybe he wouldn't come.
It's
back.
always like this. It's like this every year.
Yeah.
He's like non-committal every single time that there's a commitment to be made. He's non-committal. Now, to his credit, he usually has done the thing that you think he's going to do, short of maybe like that move to the Heat, which I'm not sure,
Right.
how many, whether you saw it coming or not. And maybe you want to say moving back to the Cavs was like sort of predetermined, but things that the deck chairs really did actually line up pretty nicely on that.
Mm-hmm.
This is not new for him. He's like this all the time. He's very cagey. He wants to put pressure on management. He wants them to do things. He wants them to know that he's like, maybe not sure. He compliments people at different times, like during the season to kind of, complimenting the OKC coach out of nowhere, right? Like mentioning New York. Like he just does this stuff all the time. So I actually don't take any value out of it. I do think the situation is a little different because his son thing, I think, is a real thing. And I think that actually really matters. But I also think that, like, if I had to put my life, net worth on it, I would put him back in LA. So I take it up to a point, but not all the way.
Would you, if you were a team in the NBA, would you draft Bronny if he comes out and at worst just kind of hold him ransom for the Lakers to come get or whatever? You know what I mean? Like there's this weird thing of, on the one hand, he's LeBron James. He, is he the greatest of all time behind Michael Jordan? Fantastic. So sometimes there are these things where it's like, okay, it's understood. Listen, the Lakers are going to draft Bronny because LeBron wants to play with them. But if I was any other team and I come up and I find the right inflection point in what's supposed to be a weak draft class, like, yeah, we're taking Bronny. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Maybe we end up getting just more than he's
crazy,
could possibly be worth at follow draft, right?
Yeah, I think I was thinking about this right after I saw that. Actually, I know this is a Nets podcast, but this stuff matters. Like the overall sort of NBA landscape is going to matter for how the Nets are shaping up here, and sort of like what's going to be
if
available.
The Nets sneak into the back end of the first round of this draft and they draft Bronny specifically just to be like, hey, we want some assets or a player from you, the Lakers. Like, yeah, it should matter to every team that wants to improve themselves.
The stories that came out around after the Lakers lost, I mean, they had to have all been pre-written because they came out so fast. Like the Darvin Ham maybe getting fired article was out before the guys were even in the locker room, right? Like the Bron interview he gives it. They mentioned the part about like being open to drafting Bronny James. I mean, that was like already the media release was already ready, and they just needed to like wait till they were fully knew they were going to be drafting to make it happen. I do think that teams will probably try to leverage it. I'm not sure they'll go all the way and draft him. I just don't think they're seen as a high prospect. It's a huge risk because he's really not a very high prospect. And you would seemingly only be drafting him for LeBron, who's old. And again, but this is totally unprecedented. I don't think we've ever seen draft leverage around a player because you knew another player loved that player, more than anything in the world, right? There's no example. There's no example from the NBA where this has ever happened. I mean, there's guys who have been teammates. I mean, that's not even close. Like this is something totally, totally different around a guy who's still awesome. I mean, he's clearly not peak LeBron, but he's still amazing and would make almost every team better. Would make every team better that he went on even at an advanced age. So yeah, I don't really have a good context for it. I think this will be I don't think I was prepared to think that this was going to be a major talking point going into the draft, and it's going to be. It's going to be a huge talking point because I think LeBron is still good enough to really sway teams' fortunes, especially. And if there's the signal is that he would come play on any team for any price, let's say that Bronny's on, then
Right.
that
Right.
is a major landscape shift. I don't think that will happen, but it's crazy that we're even talking about it.
But okay, so two things. One, just saying that the phrase of, finding out that a superstar talent loves a potential prospect more than anything in the world, because obviously it's his son. But I just like the idea of being like, LeBron James loved Chet Holmgren more than anything else in the world. And he
Yeah,
was
loved him
desperate for
like a
the
son.
Lakers to get him just to keep him. Yeah, like I would go and play anywhere that Chet Holmgren goes. Like, really? I love him more than anything in the world. You have 3 kids, does not matter. But to your point, is there any price point for certain teams, and maybe the Nets are one of them? Say if you're the Nets and you get into the 20th pick, any team from, let's say, 18 to the back end of the first round, Bronny James is not worth that. However, to your point, if LeBron is saying, I've done everything that I want to do in my career, it's just about playing with my son. Great,
Yep.
we drafted him. Come sign a $5 million a year contract to play with your son for the next 2 seasons. Like, that's 1,000% worth it. And any team that thinks they could even possibly, accomplish that, of course, are going to well overspend on a player like Bronny just to say, hey, okay. And if you're the Lakers, maybe it's even a nice kind of little out here. Like maybe it's the excuse to start going in a different direction if you know the writing is on the wall. And that's more about the Western Conference than it is just about LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and what you think this team is going to be going forward. We got
By the way, I
really
think
deep into
to me
Good.
personally, maybe it's because I'm a parent, but I think it's a massive legacy boost if you do it. Like, I think it would be the coolest story ever. That
Yeah, the Griffeys, right? In baseball.
yeah, right, it's right, because they played in the same team. I think, and they played in the same lineup a few times, right? But like, it's one of those things where it's a legacy booster. Like, if you forewent your chance at another championship because you're like, I have a once in a lifetime chance to play with my son. To me, that's a legacy boost. Like,
Of
that's
course.
not that's not a legacy knock. I mean, and yeah. So anyway, I think it would be a really, really cool story. And maybe the Nets should go after Bronny. I don't know.
Maybe that should be on the Bronny sweepstakes. I want to get to like the Bucks because I think that's really interesting here coming up. I'll throw this in just very quickly here as another low-level team flipping over to the East. The Miami Heat, I think, are a very fascinating team too. They always find a way to be competitive. They're always better than you think they should be, even when they were dealing with injuries. But also, they feel like they're getting to a place here. Jimmy Butler, you have Bam Adebayo still, but that roster, when you look at it, you can see how they're old pretty quick and how they always overachieve. You're always pleasantly surprised when you see them, and you never want to face them in the first round of the playoffs. But that's another team that's just kind of sitting there, and you could say, oh, reconfiguring this on the fly might not be the worst thing in the world for them either. Let's talk a little Bucks, though. Let's talk Giannis. Let's talk Dame Lillard, and a lot. There's the laundry list is long here for the players at a high-profile level that could be on the move. The question is, how much should age factor into it if you're the Nets or any team around the league? We'll talk about that coming up next.
All right, take another pause here. Tell you more about Monopoly Go. There's so much great stuff to say about this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments, wherever you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. There's just so much to get. Grab unique stickers. You can trade with friends to compete for albums and overall big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis. Love that. Taunt your friends. I know sports fans love to taunt their friends when you smash the buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new time events that will help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it for free on the Google Play or App Store. Game on.
So as we continue the Locked On Nets episode, we're getting a little bit broad here because the NBA playoffs are going on, and I don't want to be a spoiler here. The Nets didn't make it, but there are a lot of players and a lot of teams. I mentioned the Bucks there as well. The weird part for me is, especially think about everything, by the way, mention all those instant articles. Turns out that Kevin Durant, we talked about this a little bit, he didn't like the offensive system. It wasn't what he wanted.
Awesome.
So
perfect.
I got to tell you, man, we already talked about this. We alluded to this a little bit, but then all of these articles came flooding out after we last recorded. You already said it. It's getting
such a bad
easier to question Kevin Durant and the way that he's, his
Oh,
motivations and the way he tries to frame things on the back end. It's getting bad.
No, forget legacy. Like his thing is totally tarnished. Sorry, he just did it, and that's not even an it's not like a Nets hater thing. It's just so obvious. Like you just can't have this happen at every stop, right? Like you can't have it every stop where like something wasn't right, or like you weren't it wasn't, something just didn't work out, or you needed something else, or you thought this, but they never did this. You're on like 7 coaches, right? 3 teams,
Yeah.
or 4 teams. It's just and some teams would the greatest situation ever in Golden State wasn't good enough, right? Like get to the whatever. I don't know. I'm not going to run through the whole list, but the part where this flames out and it's kind of just I wanted it one way and I didn't get it is just it's okay to say once and maybe twice, but really once you're on your 3rd time, it's just like no legit nobody wants to hear it. Nobody cares. It's like, dude, it's you. If you meet a jerk in the morning, you met a jerk. If you meet 4 jerks in the morning, you're the jerk. Like that's just the way it goes. Sorry. If it's the same story at every stop, it's you. It's you. Sorry. He's an awesome player. He's one of the greatest all time. I love watching him play. It's amazing. It's nothing about that. But it's just like how many different excuses are there going to be about why he didn't win? At some point, it's just like, hey, we didn't get it done. Sorry. I don't know. I find it hilarious.
It's going to be fascinating to see what the Suns choose to do, right? You unload all these, new owner comes in, unload all the assets to Brooklyn to get Kevin Durant in the door. You bring him in. Beal, we at the time said this is not the right guy to add into this mix here to be the next elevator and create this, super team with Booker. That doesn't work out. What does Booker feel about it? Does he want to stay or go? I think no matter what, you try to hold on to him like grim death if you're the Phoenix Suns and rebuild around him because he's still young. But that's a fascinating one. Then we're recording this ahead of the Bucks game. It feels like because of their injuries, obviously no Giannis, whether or not Dame's going to be able to go, again, another team that would have built-in excuses if they wanted to just run this thing right back the next year. They also would have built-in excuses to say it's time to maybe reset this thing, because even bringing in Dame Lillard, we all kind of agreed, I think, throughout the course of the season of saying, this doesn't look like the team that's going to take on Boston in the Eastern Conference Finals and win and go, even having Giannis. So if Milwaukee even marginally makes choices here about saying we just need to reconfigure this thing, Brook Lopez, Dame Lillard, like maybe they still try to hold on. We're going to be committed to Giannis, but there's a lot of even fringe edge, second and third tier guys that are going to go here. But the Bucks are uniquely old in a lot of their supporting cast. That makes me wonder what they're going to choose to do going forward here. Difference when you talk about Eastern Conference teams, I think, obviously, is the Eastern Conference always feels like you're just one good move away from being right back at the top of the discussion. To me, Philadelphia falls into this category, too, with their injury concerns in this postseason.
Yeah, I see the Bucks situation as a little different than these other teams because I think, like you said, they have enough built-in excuses at this point. Giannis gets hurt. Lillard gets hurt. They switch coach mid-year. It's like the first year of this experiment. Sure. And the minutes with Giannis and Dame on the court together were really good. And so, I mean, 1,700 plus minutes, plus 9.56 net rating, right? Like awesome on offense, like 124 offensive rating. I think you can look at that and be like, hey, look, we just got dealt a bad injury thing here. The East might still be weak. If we can just stay healthy, I agree with you on their sort of their supporting cast, but like in general, your top 2 guys are still really good together. I think that situation is just going to play out where the timing was just bad and we're going to try to run it back and no one's going to really, kind of try to tip over the apple cart too much. That's my gut feeling. And by the way, you mentioned that we're recording this before the game. My opinion is unchanged whether they win or lose this game. Like that's my opinion, no matter what. I think they lose because both those guys are out, but regardless, my opinion wouldn't change after like one win. It would only help it because like there's a chance they might come back. Sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah. Well, by the way, if they win the game, you go, well, look, even without Giannis, they're still able to compete and win some games and make a series a little bit longer. But just to your point on it too, though, okay, Dame Lillard, Pat Bev, Chris Middleton, Giannis, Brook Lopez, right? And then you have the supporting cast members. I mean, Chris Middleton's an interesting figure, I think, and there's already speculations about would they try to reconfigure that roster even more than when they had gone with Holiday. So I just wonder about what will the version of that team look like. So maybe it's not Giannis, but is Dame definitely back in a part of this thing? is Middleton definitely, Brooke Lopez. Like there's at least, this team is at least to me one that's going to reconfigure itself in a big way. I think Philadelphia is that similar kind of boat. Tobias Harris, okay, it's Maxey, it's Embiid, but what does it look like for them, and how do you make this team a little bit deeper? That's the hard part for a team like Milwaukee. They don't have a lot of ammunition to go improve themselves in marginal ways. They're going to be dependent on Doc Rivers coaching and your top level talent there as well. Any other teams, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head here, that jump out to you as being ones that are prime for a big shift here? Understanding results oriented. We've mentioned the Mavs and the Clippers before. Clippers would be the team there. I think Mavs should be mostly buoyed by what they're getting here, but that loss at home the other night was kind of a gut punch for their agenda as well.
I think we see pretty big moves coming from the Pelicans, to be honest. Like
oh, yes. That's the obvious one. Yeah.
They're out against the Thunder. I mean, they're another one where, like, when Zion played, they looked really, really good. Ingram did not look good at all. Now, he got just absolutely locked up by Lou Dort. But he ends his game 2 for 14 in their final game. I think they're going to probably tell themselves a story where they can probably move on from him, just because it just like wasn't a totally clean fit with Zion. And you got a glimpse of Zion. If we can just, I know it's a huge just, but if we can just keep him at least a little healthy, right? Like, yeah, that was a guy right before he hurt his hurt his hamstring in that game against the Lakers. I mean, he was like in full takeover mode. And
yes.
I think that with him, you have Ingram expiring next year. I think they'll probably try to move on from him. That's my gut. And so not a full blow up of that team, but he seems like a very obvious guy to be on the move. And maybe that's a episode for another day about whether or not like that's a clean fit with the Nets, right? Like, is Ingram a guy you want to try to think about getting a year early at maybe a slightly lower price because the playoffs were rough, right? And I don't know. Maybe we save it. Well, let's chamber that one, because that might be a kind of another day down the line, one to discuss. But I think that's a real name to kind of keep an eye on.
And I think this is the table setter, right? And what we're discussing right now, these NBA playoffs, is the table setter for, it's more than just Donovan Mitchell. It doesn't need to be this conversation about Donovan Mitchell or bust for the Brooklyn Nets. There's going to be a lot of different scenarios to paint here, and I think Pelicans should be chief among them. So as we continue to roll through the playoffs, we'll start to break down some of these possibilities for Brooklyn.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's a lot, man. Like I said, I think these playoffs in general have sort of like, I mean, I probably could have foreseen some of it coming, but it really just gets crystallizes when these teams lose, right? It's like, that's when you really start seeing it. It's a little hard to see before they're completely bounced, but once they're bounced, and it becomes very eye-opening, especially when it's, a sweep or in 5 games and it's just not that close. Those are the situations where you really start kind of perking up and saying, oh, wow, that was a lot further. That was not as far along as I thought it was going to be with some of these teams. And that's just the nature of the playoffs, which makes it awesome. I mean, the playoffs, even though some of these games have been blowouts, like, what's that?
They are who we thought they were. It's like some of these things.
Yeah,
like,
or worse.
Okay,
I mean, or potentially worse. And it's really got to be eye-opening. The really and this is the final thought here for me, but the really problematic thing for some of these teams is it's not like you're getting bounced by another old guy. You're getting bounced out of these playoffs by young teams. And that's actually the much bigger problem. It's like, it's one thing if it's LeBron versus Steph and they lose to each other in the finals, and it's like, well, we're on the same age curve. Now it's like when Kevin Durant loses to Anthony Edwards, you're like, oh, okay, that's not great. All right. Or it's like the Lakers again with the Nuggets, who don't seem like they're going anywhere anytime soon. It's like, whoa, okay, this is problematic. So anyway, it's like, it's the nature of the losses that kind of contribute to it too. All right, we're going to get out of here. The playoffs roll on. I'd really encourage you, I know a lot of Nets fans out there, tune into these games, man. These playoff games are awesome. Like some of these ones, and it's only stands to get better going forward. In the meantime, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Nets over on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Is this Jack Nicholson or Jack Nicholas? This is for you, Doug. Being married means I can break wind and eat ice cream in bed.
Oh, well, that sounds like you personally before the podcast, but I'm going to say Jack Nicholson. Is that it?
Turns out it was Brad Pitt. Anyway, there you go.
One of the all-time great poets. Awesome. Great setup. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball.